Tartaglia, or better known for his alias Childe, is one of the highest skill ceiling characters in the entire game of Genshin Impact. Not only is he hard to obtain, but he's hard to understand and very hard to master. My name is Braxophone, and today we're going to be going in depth on the character Tartaglia and discussing talents, DPS rotations and optimizations, combat tips, and where he fits in a team composition. Artifacts and builds are for a coming video, so subscribe now to see that video when it releases in a very short amount of time, so that way you can build your Tartaglia optimally. If you're looking for a specific section of the video, you can go ahead and check in the description where we will have timestamps laid out so you can skip to wherever you want to be. First things first, let's talk about his talents. His normal or basic attack is Cutting Torrent. This is a 6-hit combo, and it has a charged attack variant that deals hydro damage and applies Riptide on full charge. Riptide is a debuff that sits on enemies for about 10 seconds that activates a hydro damage proc when Childe attacks in various ways. Once the enemy has the Riptide debuff on them, a fully charged bow attack that's cast on them will cause the hydro damage to proc, which is called Riptide Flash, and it hits for a total of 3 times in succession. Additionally, it staggers light enemies. This effect can only occur once every 0.7 seconds, but that is a super low cooldown, so you can basically spam it. Riptide damage is considered normal attack damage, which means anything that buffs your normal attack will also buff Riptide damage. When an enemy with the Riptide debuff is defeated, the Riptide Burst will proc, and it will give Riptide to all surrounding enemies in the radius, which can be seen on screen now. Here are the level 2 stats for the casts, and cooldowns and skill durations are unaffected by level up. Tartaglia's next ability is called Foul Legacy Raging Tide. This talent is a stance change. What it does is it changed his attacks from ranged attacks to melee attacks. All of his melee attacks do hydro damage. This ability procs Riptide slash every hit, which deals AoE hydro damage to all enemies that have been inflicted with Riptide. This is considered elemental skill damage, which means the effects of weapons like Stringless apply to this damage output. The elemental skill lasts up to 30 seconds total, and the cooldown is based off of how long the ability is active. If you wait the entire 30 seconds and do not revert back to ranged form, the cooldown will be extended to 45 seconds, so make sure to cancel even if it's just a millisecond before 30 seconds goes off. To help with that, there's an indicator above Tartaglia that turns red when the cast is close to 30 seconds. The default cooldown of this ability is 6 seconds. If you turn on the ability and turn it right off, it's going to be 6 seconds, and if cancelled right at the 30-second mark, it will give you a cooldown of 36 seconds before you can enter melee stance again. Upon level up, damage numbers are increased, but the durations and cooldowns of abilities are unaffected. Moving on to his Elemental Burst, the ability is called Havoc Obliteration. The cooldown is 15 seconds, which means that it is spammable if you have a lot of elemental recharge. This Elemental Burst is actually 2 different abilities. If you are in range stance when you cast it, it is called Flash of Havoc. It fires an AoE Hydro Arrow that applies Riptide to every enemy it touches. This ability returns 20 energy to Tartaglia after cast. To give you something to compare it to, the radius is slightly bigger than Amber's Arrow Rain. At level 1, it does roughly 80% less damage than the melee stance burst. This means that this ability serves better as an opener rather than a closer. If you are in melee stance when you cast his Elemental Burst, you will perform a large melee AoE of hydro damage. This triggers an effect called Riptide Blast, which does the following. Riptide Blast clears Riptide status from all enemies with it applied, and triggers a Hydro Explosion that deals AoE hydro damage. This can affect multiple enemies, and could therefore create a massive circle of AoE hydro. This is insane mob clears. Damage dealt by Riptide Blast is considered elemental burst damage, which means it's affected by weapons and artifacts with elemental burst damage increases. On to Tartaglia's passives, we have his first one called Never Ending. This increases Riptide's debuff duration from 10 seconds to 18 seconds total. His next passive is called Sword of Torrents. Crits of normal and charged attacks in range stance apply Riptide to enemies, and all normal melee stance attacks give Riptide. His final passive alone makes him worth running. It increases every party member's first talent by 1 level. If you have a DPS that carries with auto attacks, this is the ability for you because it's going to buff your damage by a huge number. Now that we've talked about his kit, we can talk about his standard rotation optimization. As a disclaimer before we go into DPS testing, this character is below the level of the enemies being fought, so the damage will be lower. Additionally, talents are also a low level and the build is incomplete. This DPS testing is for finding the strongest attack rotation, meaning that no matter what your build is, the result of this test will be the same. All crits have been removed from DPS calculation, and Riptide is not in effect for any of these tests. Each combo was timed, performed 2 times, and the DPS was calculated from there. There are 2 stances to test here in terms of DPS strings, so we're going to go over the ranged one first, and then we'll get into the melee one. The combos we tested today are 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the full combo. Between each of these combos, we'd perform a short hop as to cancel the animation for the next hit in the combo. Do not try 1 or 1, 2 with an animation cancel because you're going to have a bad time. For disclaimer number 2, something to note is that golems do have physical damage resistance, but it won't affect the overall outcome of the best combo for ranged stance. The first combo I tested was the 1-2-3 combo, which yielded us a total of 231.7 DPS over 2.9 seconds. The next combo performed is the 1-2-3-4 combo, and that yielded us a DPS of 208.9 over 4.5 seconds. The reason for the higher time and lower DPS output is likely for the delay in animation between 3 and 4. The following combo is 1-2-3-4-5 with the short hop at the end to animation cancel. This one got us a DPS of 227 over the span of 5.4 seconds. The final combination we tested is the 1-6 combo. This combo yielded us a DPS of 237.6, and that was over the total of 6.6 seconds. From this data, we can conclude that the best range rotation is the full combo with the animation cancel at the end. If you don't animation cancel, it's going to greatly lower your DPS, so make sure to master that short hop. Moving on to the melee stance DPS tests, damage here is going to be higher by default because it's elemental, but in general, due to the damage percentages shown in the talents page, melee is going to do more damage. The first combo that we tested today for melee stance is the 1-2-3 charged attack combo, and that yielded us a DPS of 1226.5 over 4.3 seconds. The second one we tested is the 1-2-3-4 charged attack combo, and that yielded us a DPS of 1075 over 6 seconds. The third combo we looked at is 1-2-3-4-5 charged attack, and this yielded us a DPS of 1141.5 over 6.6 seconds. And finally, the last combo we checked out was 1-2-3-4-5-6, the full melee combo, and that yielded us 850 DPS over 7.5 seconds. Funny enough, the last combo we tested was the worst combo, and I think the reason for that has to do with the animation timing. The 6th attack in the combo looks very similar to the charged attack, but it does significantly less damage, which means that the charged attack is going to up your DPS in every single other combo. Overall, 1-2-3 charged attack is going to yield the highest overall consistent DPS, but it'll be a stamina siphon. It'll suck your stamina up and you'll never see it again for the rest of the fight because you'll keep throwing it away as soon as you get it. 1-2-3-4-5 charged attack is your next best bet and takes less stamina in the long run. 1-2-3-4 is hard to cancel with a charged attack, and that's lower DPS. Ultimately, charged attack spamming will also be very strong and potentially yield higher short-term burst damage, but it costs a ton of stamina to spam. Now that we know the results, we're going to look at some combat tips to make sure that you are playing your absolute best on the character Tartaglia. As stated before, use the full 6-hit ranged combo with a tiny hop to cancel the animation to keep firing faster in order to maximize ranged stance DPS. And also, as stated before, use the 1-3 charged attack combo to maximize DPS over long fights, but spam charged attack more if you're going for a shorter fight. This will maximize melee stance DPS. When you initiate a fight, use your bow to proc Riptide on the first enemy, and then after that, kill the enemy in the vicinity of the others to share the Riptide before you use your melee elemental burst. This should kill them very fast. If your melee stance is on cooldown, you can replace the hop in the full range combo with a dash to kite backwards to avoid enemy attacks when they close the distance. Your ranged and melee combos can be animation canceled at any time by a stance change. If you're having the distance closed on you in your range stance, cancel your longest animation by switching to melee stance. So now that we've gone over a couple combat tips and the results of our DPS tests, we can talk about where Tartaglia or Childe fits into your team composition. While I do think he would be an excellent support, there are definitely characters who do it better, so I think that his best position is definitely going to be in the primary or secondary DPS position. It all depends on how you decide to use him. If you want to keep constant melee uptime, then you're probably going to want him to be your secondary DPS because that only lasts 30 seconds, and if you're doing something like Abyss, you're not going to clear the floor fast enough. However, due to the versatility of his kit, he makes an excellent primary DPS considering he can still pull crazy high damage numbers when kitted out correctly. If Tartaglia is paired with a character that can leave the field but still apply elemental damage, he is going to thrive. Some of the best characters for this are Kaya, Fischl, Xiangling, and Lisa, who can all leave their element on the field by using their elemental burst. Since when played correctly, he's able to proc hydro damage extremely fast, he would pair greatly with an elemental mastery build as well. But I'm not going to say too much about that yet because I have some build videos coming out for you guys really soon and I don't want to spoil anything. Before we wrap up, here's some info on his constellations. C1 decreases melee stance cooldown by 20%. C2 generates 4 energy whenever enemies with Riptide debuff are killed. C3 increases melee stance damage. C4 triggers Riptide Slash in melee stance and Riptide Flash in range stance every 4 seconds on enemies with Riptide debuff, and this cooldown is not shared. C5 increases elemental burst damage, and C6 makes it so that when melee stance elemental burst is cast, it resets the cooldown of melee stance, so you're able to go right back into melee stance whenever the skill is over. These constellations are all super strong, and I love the way they made Childe's kit. If you get him all the way to C6, you can basically make a 100% melee uptime build, which would be nuts. That about wraps it up for this video, so if you want to be in the loop on Childe or Tartaglia, make sure to sub to my channel so that way you can be updated whenever I upload one of those build videos that I am coming out with many of. Tell me what your favorite thing about the patch 1.1 update is in the comments below. Make sure to leave a like if you've enjoyed the video, and as always, thank you guys so much. We just hit 2K subs, which is amazing. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day. See ya.